You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Fred Childers. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. We have a lot to get to. Continued fallout in the capital city after ExxonMobil pulled its request for a major tax incentive in East Baton Rouge Parish. Company officials cited ongoing uncertainty over the Baton Rouge business climate after the East Baton Rouge School Board rejected the oil giant's push for exemptions. Now, the announcement drew reaction from around the state, including from Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome, who came out publicly to back Exxon. Mayor Broome was joined by other elected officials and business leaders just outside of City Hall, where they pledged to work with Exxon in the future to ensure the company's growth in the Baton Rouge area.
As we speak, Exxon executives are making a major decision about their plant expansion here in Baton Rouge.
ExxonMobil is reportedly ready to expand and is looking to hire 300 workers. An Exxon spokesperson on hand at the announcement said the company hopes for a more predictable and stable business environment in Baton Rouge, so that would be key. Now, the head of the Baton Rouge Chamber of Commerce this week said he was actually optimistic about Baton Rouge's economic future. Adam Knapp's Thinking Bigger in 2019 address is an optimistic view, and some believe a stark contrast to the view from many in the wake of the ITEP controversy and hundreds of layoffs in Baton Rouge in recent weeks. Brack also penned an open letter to the city that was published in The Advocate in the wake of ExxonMobil's decision to pull their ITEP request and what the potential fallout could be for the city. There's also a proposal to override the executive order from Governor John Bel Edwards, which made the no vote from the school board possible in the first place. And we'll take an in-depth look to one of the state's lawmakers proposing the change later on in the show. Tomorrow, a new law takes effect in Louisiana that could seriously restrict the remaining abortion clinics in the state. Pro-choice advocates see the law as a step toward completely eliminating abortions in Louisiana. Crystal Whitman explains what Act 620 calls for.
Protecting the rights of women was State Representative Katrina Jackson's motive behind the admitting privileges law created back in 2014. Act 620 requires doctors who perform abortions to get permission to send their patients to hospitals within 30 miles and thereby making that doctor an honorary staff member.
The legislative intent was for everyone who performed surgery in the state of Louisiana to be under that requirement, but because abortion facilities were regulated under a different statutory provision, somehow they had escaped the requirement.
Advocates say the law will protect women in the event of a complication by ensuring that the doctor who performed the abortion is with the patient throughout the care.
Well, we're out here in the morning, every morning, cold or hot. We tell the women, listen, God never makes a mistake. How blessed it is to fruit of the womb. We have a free place next door here. You get free ultrasound, free counseling, free doctor, free everything. And we want to help you.
Jackson says it's a step in the right direction.
I don't hide the fact that I'm pro-life. It was a strong point I came to in my 20s, that I would stand for life. I don't hide that fact. But I've also said that I'm in the business of passing constitutional bills, bottom line. And I hope that one day Roe versus Wade is overturned.
Crystal Whitman, Fox 44 News.
Now, clinics across the state sued and argued it was an unreasonable request of doctors because legal abortions, quote, rarely go wrong. That case is now waiting a hearing by the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, anyone who drives through Baton Rouge has probably been caught in traffic trying to get across that Mississippi River Bridge. Well, now a solution to the longtime problem may finally be in sight. Harrison Golden explains.
For years, plans for a new bridge over the Mississippi have been stop and go. But government leaders hint that the idea of a span to relieve miles of daily congestion is finally speeding up.
If we were here 15, 20 years ago, we would tell you we needed to build this bridge back then.
It's not something that we have to try and figure out if there's a need for it. We know that there's a need for it.
Following legislation from State Senator Rick Ward, 5 parish presidents and 2 state appointees will look at what it would take to make a new river crossing reality.
Where you can cross, What's the height of the bridge? What's the right-of-way impact when you touch down? In fact, if you're going to do tolling, are you going to have a toll booth or are you going to have electronic tolling?
State Transportation Chief Sean Wilson is on the new Capital Area and Bridge Authority. Members will also look at state and federal funding streams, as well as public-private partnerships.
We have a wheelbarrow full of needs and projects with a thimble full of money, and we're going to have to require the private sector absolutely to come to the table and help us.
Certain funding ideas may be up to voters.
Any of those
Ward says the bridge's future will largely hinge on winning that public trust.
We can put the best deal forward. If it doesn't pass, whenever it goes in front of the people for them to vote on it, we've really accomplished nothing.
He says funding plans could hit the ballots as early as this fall, though Wilson argues the group has a lot to discuss before nailing down a timeline.
We can't go to grocery stores and pick up a bridge and just drop it, but we can start that process. We can start making some decisions that we need to make, and those decisions are going to be decisions that are going to have to last for the next 30 to 40 to 50 years, so we've got to get it right.
For NBC Local 33 News, I'm Harrison Golden.
And that proposed bridge has already attracted some private interest. Baton Rouge investor Jim Bernard has already offered to cover construction costs up front. Well, it's tax season, and the Louisiana Department of Revenue is now accepting your state income tax returns. You can start downloading paper tax forms from the Louisiana Department of Revenue website. The agency does encourage all of us to file electronically. Filing online is faster and allows you to check the status of your returns and amend any current or prior year returns. The deadline for all state returns to be filed is May 15th, and the date for federal returns is 1 month earlier, and that is April 15th. Federal employees were back at work during the week after the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Officials expected all back pay to go out Thursday of this past week for employees forced to work without pay during the shutdown. Government contractors were not eligible for back pay. A bipartisan committee also held its first meeting with the goal to prevent a second shutdown next month.
And I hope that by reaching a compromise here, we will set a tone of bipartisanship.
I think the conference can reach a good result, left to its own devices without an interference from anybody else.
According to the Congressional Budget Office, the 35-day shutdown cost the U.S. economy at least $3 billion. Well, just before the shutdown ended, Governor John Bel Edwards explained his plan to help families of those federal workers who had to work without pay. Edwards directed the Louisiana Workforce Commission to extend unemployment benefits to cover 1,500 more federal workers in Louisiana. The money would basically act as a loan for federal workers who were on the clock without pay. They're required to repay the money after the shutdown. And though the announcement came just hours before the end of the shutdown, the decision by Edwards to allow unemployment for unpaid workers could make accessing those funds easier in case of a future shutdown.
As the mortgage still comes due, the car note, the insurance, the groceries, all of those things are still necessities of life, and so they need assistance to be able to handle that, which is why we made the announcement that we're making on this policy change in Louisiana, where these benefits are going to be available to those federal workers who are not getting paid, but they are in fact working.
One East Baton Rouge council member officially qualified to run for a more permanent seat in their district. Councilwoman Denise Amoroso is currently serving right now on an interim basis, but will be running for election in 2 months. Amoroso was appointed to the seat in July after her husband, Councilman Buddy Amoroso, died. The special election will take place on March 30th.
It's been very good for me as far as moving on after the accident, helping me to grieve and to get over, losing him and everything. So it's much more than just filling a political seat. It's also fulfilling what he wanted and being a part of the things that he was doing. Well,
State Senator Dan Claytor recently spoke at the Rotary Club about criminal justice reform. In Louisiana, it's called Criminal Justice Reinvestment, a bipartisan effort by state lawmakers. Claytor told the crowd since its implementation last year, the state appears to be saving some money with those dollars going toward public safety.
Last calendar year, we're just getting started. what our saving was $12.2 million. You say, Dan, $12.2 million in a $31 billion budget, you hadn't done anything. Well, that's real money. You know, $12 million is a lot of money. And we've made some real improvements with that. Representative YLEH from New Orleans, I don't know if many of you know Walt, but Walt said this, I think it was cockeyed, said, hey, you know, we're going to get these savings. You've talked about reinvestment, but I don't trust us, so we're going to have a bill that says 70% of it gets plowed back in of the savings. And everybody said, what? I'm a politician. You're not going to trust me? And so that bill passed pretty easily, and so 70% has to be reinvested.
Coming up next, as promised, we're talking to State Senator Bodie White about his frustration over that industrial tax exemption for ExxonMobil being voted down by a school board, and the bill he plans to draft that would keep local governments from ever doing it again. That's next on your local election headquarters.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back to This Week in Louisiana Politics. We're going to continue our coverage of ITEP. This would be the industrial tax exemption program that a lot of companies benefit from. To help us with that is Republican Senator Bodie White from Baton Rouge. Thanks for coming on the show, Senator.
Thank you, Fred. Thanks for inviting me down today.
You bet. Well, we wanted to talk to you about some legislation that you're going to introduce in April.
Yes.
And this regards ITEP.
Right.
You want to take back authority over ITEP. You want to take it from the local governments and put it back to the state. Why?
Well, the reason being is I think it's going to get way out of line. I think there's going to be less predictability, less consistency. You take the same project that the school board, East Baton Rouge School Board, just rejected, and go ask Ascension, ask West Baton Rouge if they'd like to have that project. Ask them about that polypropylene project at Exxon. Hopefully they're still going to bring it here. They've pushed back the announcement 2 to 3 months. So they may be looking back at Texas again.
Right.
So ask them if they'd like to have a $1 billion project.
Well, the governor had actually taken authority from the state and given it to the local governments with an executive order back in 2016. I want to play for you a soundbite. We asked him his reaction to the East Baton Rouge School Board rejecting that exemption for Exxon. Let's play that soundbite.
I believe that because 100% of the revenue that we're talking about that comes in from property tax goes to local government, not a dime comes to the state, that local government ought to have a seat at the table in whether or not to grant these exemptions.
So I want to get your reaction to that. Why shouldn't local governments have a seat at the table?
I think that they maybe have some input in the process, but a veto? I mean, that would be great if it was an entity that just affected one parish. ExxonMobil affects the whole metro area, the whole state. They have facilities all over the state. And if they don't do those projects, or especially this new big $1 billion one, we miss all those sales tax. We miss those industrial taxes. We miss the tax on equipment. That's state tax.
Do you feel like jobs could be
well, the income tax from the employees, yeah, we lose all those jobs. And those are not menial jobs. Even if you count contract jobs with ExxonMobil, the average is 75. Most everybody that works anything like process or management or engineering, they make over $100,000 a year. With benefits.
This was a very controversial decision by the school board. It was a rejection heard around the parish. In fact, some would even argue around the state. Mayor Broom even came out a few days after that and said she put her support behind Exxon. What did you make of that statement? Well,
I think they all of a sudden everybody realized, you know, we didn't kill the golden goose, but we sure stuck it in the eye. And they have to make a decision. Are we going to be predictable in East Baton Rouge Parish and in the state of Louisiana in the future? Because they're a major corporation, one of the biggest in the world. And they have to keep updating. They have to update. They have to update their equipment. They have to keep growing or they start dying.
Where is your legislation right now? Is it written? Is it?
No, it's not complete. The lawyers have it, and me and Representative Franklin Fall will have a meeting with the attorneys again next week.
This legislation has to start out in the House of Representatives?
No.
No? But you're just working with Representative Foyle?
He has to work with him. He had a big interest in it.
Do you believe
it affects South Baton Rouge and North Baton Rouge, the whole metro area.
Which leads to my last question. Could this become an issue on the campaign trail for the governor?
I would think so. I think it's gotten so much publicity, I think you'll hear it again. You know?
You think it'll come up again?
I think it will.
Well, and by the way, we've invited Governor Edwards on this show. That invitation still stands. Maybe we can talk about it with him a little more. What would you want to know from the governor?
Why he didn't just take some input from the sheriffs or the school boards, okay? And take that into consideration, because Louisiana Economic Development has to approve it, okay? And then the Commerce Commission, Louisiana Commerce, they have to sign off on it. It's a good deal for the state of Louisiana. And then still, if we approve it and it doesn't pan out, we have clawback. We can claw back any money or tax waivers that we gave them. We can claw that money back if they don't produce and do what they say.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm sure, as you mentioned, this is not going to go away anytime soon. Senator Bodie White, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Fred.
You bet. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. The State of the Union address now has a new date. Speaker Nancy Pelosi has invited President Trump to address the country from the House floor, this time on February 5th. The two were at odds over the annual address during the recent shutdown, with Pelosi pulling her invitation for January 29th. Former Georgia gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams will deliver the Democratic response. A bill to withhold pay from Congress and the president during a shutdown has bipartisan support on Capitol Hill. Representative Dan Crenshaw of Texas helped introduce the bill this past week, saying, quote, federal employees should never have to carry the burden caused by a dysfunctional government. The proposed bill would withhold pay from the president, vice president, and congressmen and placed in escrow, then released after the government reopens. Well, it's an annual white tie event in D.C. that features satirical skits and tongue-in-cheek speeches by various politicians. So naturally, U.S. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana was invited to it. It's called the Gridiron Club Dinner, and every year it presents the United States Marine Band, comedy skits performed by politicians and journalists, often poking fun at themselves, and typically remarks from the President of the United States. Through 2016, every U.S. president since 1885, except for Grover Cleveland, has spoken at these dinners. Kennedy's office tells us he's giving the Republican speech, and his friend Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota is giving the Democrat speech. Up next, we'll have a look at the week ahead on your local election headquarters.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. Well, let's give you a preview of what you can expect in the coming week. Taking a look at the schedule, tomorrow, Stephen Waguespack, President and CEO of the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, will give a talk at the Press Club of Baton Rouge. Not surprisingly, we've been talking about it the entire show. His topic is the Industrial Tax Exemption Program, known as ITEP. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Fred Childers. I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.